Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Information Playground. You're listening to us. If you're listening to us on the radio, it's probably WVLP. That's an excellent little community radio station in Valparaiso, Indiana. They do a great job in the community, and they've been struggling through this time of COVID-19, as we all have. Um, they're doing a great job, and I'd love it if you live in that area or you're interested in being part of the community. Check out their website, wvlp.org. You can find them on the FM radio at 103.1. If you're listening to us on demand, the Information Playground is on all the podcast platforms that I'm aware of: Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, you name it. We're also on YouTube, and if you're watching us, that's how you're catching us. The Information Playground is dedicated to educating our listeners and things that are happening um, in our day, often of a technological nature, but not always. Today, I have a special guest, Larry Young. He's the owner of Boiling Frog Development and Business Development Strategy and Sales Training Organization, as well as the author of Walk the Sales Plank. Larry works with small to mid-sized businesses on understanding how their dream clients are, how they make buying decisions today, and then he helps to position their organization and sales staff right in the middle of their target market. We've had him on several times, but now we're going to see how he's helping organizations through the crisis and helping them to position for massive growth. So welcome, Larry. It's great to see you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on again, Ron. I appreciate it.
I always appreciate it when you're on. I know you've worked with businesses for a long time, and you've helped a lot of them through several crises, but tell us about your background.
Yeah, so a lot of my career, I was in the banking world as a senior executive, and really on the commercial banking side. So I had the privilege of being able to work with commercial customers, which are kind of business banking clients, small to mid-sized businesses, and watching them grow. The interesting thing that Ron, that I was able, that I think was a privilege, is I could be sitting in a location, as an example, and have, let's say, as an example, two engineering firms, and both of them, that serve the same clients and had the same size of people, but one would just thrive while the other just barely survived. And over the course of that, a couple decades, I took a lot of notes and I learned a lot, and I asked from these business owners, a lot of the things that made them different. And it was a privilege to kind of get to learn that. I think when I formed the company Boiling Frog 3 years ago, it was based on the parable of the boiling frog, which is we don't always recognize that our environment has changed. We just stay doing what we've always been doing, and then that, of course, becomes our demise. And so now I get to work with clients to be able to kind of help them through the business strategy and help teach them those principles that I learned of the businesses that thrived in the past. And that's kind of what I share with those clients.
Well, that's great. So we're dancing all around COVID-19. How does this crisis differ from other crises that you've seen?
Yeah, so being in this business for quite a while, I've been able to see, obviously the 2000 recession, which is really kind of the dot-com bust, if you remember that back in the day.
Very well.
And that was one of those where obviously over fundamentals and things of that nature, and that caused kind of a correction at the turn of our century. 2008, as we're very familiar, that's still fresh on a lot of our minds, was the housing crisis. So both of these recessions were because fundamentals were starting to deteriorate, and then of course that caused businesses to start to struggle. But it was almost like a slow death, if you will, not for everybody, but for some, where you could kind of see it coming and work its way out. I think, Ron, where this one's different, I think what businesses are trying to grapple with is this one happened so fast. The fundamentals of the economy, generally by and large, were very strong, but then a third party source, if you will, for lack of better words, enters into our economy and shuts everybody down. And so the lagging on the economy and the struggle that the businesses are having are an after product or an after effect of that. I mean, you look at my business, I know we've talked off camera, if you will, and I mean, I'm like most businesses where 1 week I'm talking to somebody about signing a contract for the year in 2020, and then a week later they're saying, whoa, it's all on hold and we're quarantined. That's how fast that happened. And I think that's one of the biggest differences. So we're not as prepared, or people aren't as prepared for it.
You know, I appreciate that. I was in a conversation earlier today, and the person that I was talking to pointed out that Google is pretty astute on things that are going on. Yeah. They've notified all their employees that at least as they can, they'll all be working from home until the summer of next year. Now that I'd heard that before, but I didn't put the dots together, I guess. I mean, do they know something? That's a year from now.
Yeah.
Are we still going to be dealing with this a year from now? Is it just being cautious? I don't know. I don't want to read something that isn't there. I don't want to read anything into it. At the same time, you know, it's conceivable. I hear people say we've got to wait until a vaccine's developed, and they're pegging that at next year. Sometimes I hear it's the mid-year, and other times I hear it's the end of 2021.
Right. Well, it's an interesting comment that you make, because, you know, I spoke to about 40 business owners in Phoenix. This would have been in early March. And so this is when this all was really fresh. And we were talking about how to find revenue in a crisis, you know, and it's interesting that the conversation then, how much it's just changed 4 months later. Yeah. Not only that, but how businesses now, I'm seeing them reinvent themselves, pivot, and do different things, you know, and you're starting to see that, unfortunately, that thrive versus survive. So you're right on, Ron.
Yeah, and you're right on, as always. As a business owner, what we've got to do is we can't just sit there and wait for conditions to change. Yeah. So how can you find revenue in this crisis or any other, but especially this one? And how can you reinvent your business? How can you change? Pivot is a popular word. How can you do that?
Yeah. So one of the strategies, what I tell people, like when I'm doing the business development strategy, is first, you know who you are. So one of the first things you want to do, now I'll seem like I talk out of both sides of my mouth for a second, but there's a point to it. So a lot of times we as business owners have several different income sources. And the first is to really fundamentally understand what is the most profitable aspect of my business? What is the thing that I do that makes the most money? What is the core of my business? And of course, how do I protect that? And so when you're trying to grow revenue, one of the fastest things to do is to not lose revenue, as goofy as that sounds. But then there's a point in there, and we can get into this deeper at some point, but once you've established that and you've cared for your customers and you're answering those questions, some businesses may have to kind of pivot and be able to either offer ancillary services to those customers, or be able to use that service that they do so well, that core function of their business, for other types of type clients, ones that maybe are essential that are still going. I'll give you a really good example. So I told you I had that conversation. So this is about 2.5, 3 months ago. It was right when the coronavirus was hitting, and I was doing some consulting with a construction company. And I asked them, I did my research, and you could see they started from a handyman all the way to kind of a full service construction, remodel type thing. And so I got them on the phone, the same kind of conversation. They said, well, how do we find revenue? How do we grow? And so I started asking them, what is your core business? What is the piece that not only are you the most profitable at, but you kind of dominate in your industry? And the answer is what I get from most business owners when I first start working, it's, well, everything. I'm great at everything. And no, you're not, so to speak. Now, I'm not that harsh, but it's really, are you really that great at everything, or are there some things that you just like to do? So as we started to try to kind of move through this, I said, well, what's your most profitable segment? What's the most profitable thing you do? If you do all this remodel stuff, he goes, well, selling a water heater is one of our most profitable. And so I said, okay, well, how many water heaters do you sell? And he goes, well, about one a month. Okay. That's not a business. That's an ancillary business, right? And of course, a water heater, I mean, you can't cold call people and sell a water heater. They're going to wait till it's broke. Okay, so let's back the train back up. And what is it that you really do? And what we finally came to make a long story short, is their kitchen remodels are one of their most profitable. They're the biggest ticket items, the most profitable, because it takes expertise, which this business possessed. And so now it's a matter of, well, how do we do this? So my comment, this was a long, challenging process, but at the end, what I said is, how do you have a database of clients, you know? And they said, well, yeah, we've got an email list of about 3,000 clients that we've had over the time. I said, now's the time to reach out to them. You think about it, everybody's sitting with coronavirus, everybody's quarantined in Arizona. So now you start noticing the cracks in the ceiling and the paint coming off the cupboards and hinges that aren't working and tile, blah, blah, blah. I said, wouldn't this be a time to kind of reach out to those 3,000 clients and let them know you'll follow protocols, but you can do that type of stuff? And that's what they did. So at the end of the day, the first place to start is to know what you're great at. And that's where I spend a lot of time with clients on.
So let's stay with that for just a moment. You know, I'm thinking about your example, the construction company. We've all heard Home Depot, Lowe's, all the big companies, big box stores are doing well right now for the very reason that you mentioned. You know, people are sitting home, they notice the cracks, it's time to fix things up, and it's time to maybe call in someone to do the heavy lifting, like kitchen remodel. But what about if you're not in that industry? What if you're, let's say you're a sole practitioner, and that could be an attorney or a doctor. Or let's say that, and actually let's take them one at a time. Let's start there. Let's start with healthcare, because I know a lot of people that are afraid to go visit the dentist. They're afraid to go visit the doctor. You know, a bunch of sick people there. And so that kind of stuff. How do you, keeping the social distancing regulations or requirements as they may be, how do you keep that? How do you market yourself so that your books are filled? And maybe they're not struggling with it, but after that, let's visit the attorney. I see on TV, I see commercials. Some attorneys are offering visitations over your iPad, over the internet. Are there other things you can do, especially attorneys? So let me quit asking the question and let's give you a chance.
That's okay. And again, just for the diversity of your audience, you know, I think the easy answer, this is where people roll their eyes with kind of the dub, but I mean, virtual has such a more powerful effect now than it did before. I mean, 6 months ago, we kind of scoffed at the idea of not telemedicine, because that's been around, but the idea of being able to do an exam with your iPhone, you know, with a doctor there, real estate agents selling property now with 3D virtual image. There's an industry that's blowing up. People come in and film it 3D wise and be able to show a house. I'm giving you a bunch of examples here, but what did I see? Was it Cadillac or something that has a commercial out, and they got the car salesman in there doing the drive with the phone, and the people are buying online like, hey, lay back in your seats. So the easy answer on is you're going to have to figure out either how to follow social protocols if you're the attorney or the health medicine, or you're going to have to figure out how to do it virtual. When I was in Phoenix, the internet goes out one morning. Of course, my two boys are going nuts, right? You'd think it was Armageddon then, you know, there was no Wi-Fi. So Cox comes out, you know, and he's like, I can't come in the house. And so there the guy is. I'm on my phone, my phone, and he's standing there around the corner while I sit there and try to fix my Wi-Fi. And so the answer, and same with, I was consulting somebody in the HVAC world. Now, I can't fix my air conditioner, but are there maintenance things that I can do with a phone and FaceTime or Zoom where I can do that? And so very simply put, you're going to have to figure out how to either social distance, or you're going to have to learn how to do them virtually.
Excellent.
And that's how you succeed. Yeah.
Now, you were commenting before the show that it's important to be seen by your customers and prospects at a time like this, but you had an interesting take on this. Would you share?
Yeah. So what we were talking about before is that there was this really neat idea when the virus broke out. You know, everybody would send these emails. So you get one maybe from your healthcare provider. You know, here's an update on COVID, and before long, your gym is sending you the same thing. And I mean, it's like all this AT&T. All of a sudden, everybody's an expert in sending me emails on coronavirus.
Right.
So now everybody's standing around, well, I'm trying to find revenue. So the natural thing is to go out and start reaching out to your clients and doing, I've heard people do like wellness checks, kind of that, Ron, how you doing? And now don't throw me out of the truck here, so to speak, but there's nothing wrong with that. Okay. There's nothing wrong with calling your clients and building reports, saying, how you doing? I'm here, that type of thing. At the end of the day, though, our conversation today is around growing revenue. So wellness checks are nice, but what you really need to do is be reaching out to your clients. And here's probably one of my biggest strategies is find out what problem they're facing today. So simply calling and saying, Ron, how you doing? Just that type of thing. And being able to say, Ron, where are you at right now? Like, what problem are you trying to solve today? Which, if you think about it, that's how we kind of started our conversation off earlier, right? Before we got online. What are you trying to solve today? What are you trying to do? Now, if I go back to my original point, if you know what your core business is and what you can do well, you might be able to alter, or you may have the team or resources to be able then to, help them solve that problem. And I found people having great success with this. I was consulting somebody who did a lot of social media and things and kind of that content marketing for nonprofits. Well, nonprofits by and large are kind of not shut down. They're working very hard, but funding, they're trying to find that type of piece because people aren't employed and that type of thing. And so the comment was, look, you're incredibly talented. Your core business isn't nonprofits, working to nonprofits. Your core business is media strategy and content. And the question I challenge them with is, don't you think that there's for-profit businesses out there that need those services today? The ones that are open, the ones that are still engaged in business, that are finding ways to work with their clients, with the social distancing, don't you think they need messaging? And so the strategy was to go back. And what I told her was, how many of your board members that you had success, old clients, nonprofit, that had board members that are business owners that are trying to survive? She's like, tons of them, thousands of them. I said, then you now have a prospect list. You have the ability to reach out to these people and find revenue by saying, I helped XYZ nonprofit a year ago with your messaging on, let's say, a new building campaign. And now I'm finding the business owners like you are trying to get the message out to your customers. How about we solve the problem together? And now this young lady is starting to pick up some business just by proactively going out, solving something she's great at, but to a different market.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
So let's do a couple of scenarios here. So we've got two main sources sources of revenue we want to look at. One's going to be your existing clients. The other's going to be prospective clients. Mm-hmm. So pick up the phone. Say that you're a CPA. You're wanting to do maybe that ancillary revenue we've talked about is audits. Okay, mm-hmm. Maybe that's a game changer for you. So now you pick up the phone, your existing client. It's been a while since we audited your books. It's the time of year we need to do it. Maybe it's semi-annual. We actually should have done it in June. Now it's August. We need to do this. Your client comes back and says, well, I appreciate that, but I'm debating whether I'm going to have to lay people off next month. I don't know that I can afford you to come and do an audit right now. Mm-hmm. How do you respond to an existing client like that?
Yeah, those are always a bit of a challenge. Now, this will seem like I'm trying to get out of your answer the easy way, but we all have to understand when we're in business, sometimes when we're calling out to help somebody with a problem, mm-hmm. we can't solve every problem. So the answer you give me, Ron, I mean, I've unfortunately, doing what I do, I've been talking to people in the last 4 months and say, I've got 1 month of income left. That's just tough, right? I mean, if someone's got to lay people off, I mean, there's an authentic caring piece that has to be there for them. But is there something else bookkeeping work or something that in there in your example that you could pick up if they have to lay people off, that you could do at a cheaper rate until they get back on their feet. Not that I really want to go the cheap route, but
Right.
is there something that you can do that would help them be more efficient? But at the end of the day, what I typically tell them is, Ron, you tell me what problem you're trying to solve. I'm in accounting, per your example. What is it that you're trying to solve, and how can I help you become more efficient and collaborate together? And again, some problems you just can't solve.
I really like that response, and I'll tell you why. Because at the end of the day, some clients, now we're talking existing clients, you've got a relationship with these people. They're, I don't know about, in larger enterprise companies, you can't say that all your clients are your friends. In the smaller business, you usually can. I know I can.
Yeah.
These are people that I've worked with many times for years, some in a few cases over decades. And so, you know, when I approach them and they give me an answer like that, my response is, if there's something I can do at cost, if there's something that I can do that will help them through this, that's the right thing for a friend to do. It's the right thing for anyone to do if they care about them. And I care about my clients. The other thing is, and this is not going to be sound as genuine as I would like it, but most people appreciate that. You help them out when they need it. Then when things are better, chances are they'll listen to what you were trying to get them involved with to begin with. There's just two ways to look at it. And if you don't look at both sides, you're probably dishonest, because both of those things are going to happen. You help your friend out in a time of need as best you can, because you're right. You can't do everything. Can't give everything away. Otherwise, you're looking for a job. But at the same time, what you can do, you do. And hopefully that'll be either appreciated down the road or reciprocated perhaps, but certainly appreciated. So I love the answer. What about prospects? These are people that you don't have a relationship with. Maybe you don't know them as well. How do you approach them?
Yeah, those are the easiest because, easiest because that's kind of the playground that I play in, which is trying to grow our business through acquiring new clients. But one of the fastest ways, if you're trying to find revenue, I mean, you can call, right? You can go to your prospect list and call and ask the same thing. What problem are you trying to solve? There's a powerful thing that I used to do back in the day, and I still coach clients to do that, but go back and look at your pipeline. Look for what I call pipeline leakage. And so I always get a funny look at people when I say pipeline leakage, but the idea is, what are the deals that I lost? It depends on your selling cycle. Like your selling cycle might be 12 to 24 months to get the client that you're after. And so maybe you go back 24 months. And what you're doing is you first start looking at the prospects that, I'll use a sports analogy, that you're right at the goal line, right? You rushed all the way down the field with them and you were going to do something. You're about ready to cross the goal line, and now you got stopped and somebody else won the deal. These are great people to start with, because if you think about it, you already had the rapport, you already had the credibility, but for some simple nuance, you lost the deal. Those are your warmest prospects to go back. And the strategy that you use, Ron, is to call them and say, look, I know we went after Project A deal, 18 months ago, and you went with someone else. I'm just curious, is your problem today the same as it was then? Is there something different that you're trying to solve? And you would be amazed at not only the thankfulness with them calling, the fact you followed up, and of course that you're already starting at a very good place because you had that rapport and credibility. Powerful way to find new revenue. And what you'll find is that all of a sudden you'll be surprised, maybe the person that won the deal over you isn't taking care of them. So I had a young lady do this. This was probably at the beginning of the pandemic. We sat down and I said, go through your pipeline. So we went through her pipeline and we picked out 5 deals. I said, call them all. We did this. And so she calls all 5 of those, and she calls me back a week later, just giddy. And she said, well, giddy in a way, she said, of the 5 that I called that I had lost the deal, the person that won the deal, the sales professional that won the deal, hadn't even contacted them yet to see how they were doing, what was going on. And the cool part is those companies decided to defer that project until 2021 because the pandemic was going on. So those funds were still kind of there, allocated, if you will. And so they were able to brainstorm and come up with solutions that didn't exist when she lost the deal. And now, she's off with a couple of those. And who do you think those people are going to remember when that thing renews next time? It'll be her. And that's a powerful way, Ron, for people to find quick, easy revenue.
Oh, that's excellent. So if you're focusing on deals in your pipeline, customers, prospects, then is it best to cut price to get more business?
Typical consultant answer, but not always, or depends, right? We use the word depends.
Yeah.
Right? So here's what I encourage people to do, because the conversation today is how do we find, more revenue? And one of the easiest or simplest ways to find revenue is to raise your price. And so usually I get kind of a funny look with that. But you remember, well, we probably don't remember it, but the 1973 recession was a really good example. And this is when IBM came out at that time. And during that recession, they raised all of their prices because their mantra, now you probably remember this, is that's where the saying came from, that nobody gets fired for hiring IBM. If you've ever heard that, because
Yes.
IBM is so strong and blah, 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 especially at that time. So here's what I advise clients to do. Don't go with the cutthroat, I'm going to cut my price to get it. That's the easy tendency. The problem is it doesn't position you strong for when you survive and then you try to grow. Because you asked me at the onset, how do you find revenue and then create massive growth for the future? And there was a study, I'm going to get this wrong, but there's they looked at the 73, all the recessions up and through 2008. Companies that cut their prices, there was only like 11% of those, Ron, that ever returned to their previous glory when they studied these 4,700 companies. So then they looked at companies that were able to just kind of either just cross-sell or those types of things. And it really wasn't actually that much more. What they found was the companies that figured out how to pivot and then be able to cut out of their organization areas or products and services that aren't profitable, when they use those two combinations, that those were 4 times as likely to survive those recessions. And so the message is, you can't cut your way to massive growth in the future. Right. And you can't just slash your expenses in your organization as a means to just survive. There has to be a balance. Cut out what's not working and then price accordingly. So what I counsel businesses around is, how can I actually raise my price in this time, but provide more value in lieu of that? So you'll see companies that maybe they add an extended warranty or more favorable terms. You raise the price, but you give more favorable terms. You can do all sorts of things. Maybe you can add in a free service call or a free virtual consultation, those types of things, but don't automatically go to cutting price. Here's what I've learned over 20 years, is that if you can provide enough value for a client, you're never going to be beat up on price. So in theory, at a time like this, if you provide more value and better consulting, better information, better, in your world, better tools and techniques, or you'll throw in sometimes, it could be a guarantee or something like that, Ron. People will pay more for it because businesses that are doing well will do so. So now you get me on my soapbox when you ask me about cutting prices, because I'm not a big fan of that. That's not your initial go-to strategy.
That's excellent. I appreciate that. In a world where I think Walmart probably is one of the biggest names in retailing, they got that by being the cheapest. But that may work for Walmart, and it has. But I haven't seen it work for anybody else. There's one Walmart. Anybody else that's tried to go to the bottom line and cut their way to success has cut their way out of business instead, that I've been aware of.
We'd have to have a longer conversation, probably not for today, but there's businesses out there, Ron, that will focus on cost leadership. And that's just literally, that's what we're going to do. But for most of us, we're trying to provide value. right? You're trying to command a price and provide value. And maybe we can talk about this another time, because when you do that, then that can't be the first thing you go to, which is cut your price if you're a value provider.
I love it.
Yeah.
So let's talk back to the team and growing more revenue. How do you maximize your team? How do you get everything working on all cylinders?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'll preface the answer with I am a firm believer in the development of people. So if you want to grow your business, grow your people. I think I've told you that on other podcasts, because investing in your people is how you're going to be able to grow. That being said, a lot of times you look at your bottom 10 to 20% of your sales force, and if they can't sell during good times, they can't necessarily sell during bad times. And I know that's a little bit of a Debbie Downer, if you will, but there's a reality in there that if they can't sell then, they can't sell now. There is an opportunity to gain revenue by adding sales professionals. There's a lot of great salespeople that are going hungry right now that are willing to work in those. And so usually what I tell businesses is to have a very robust recruitment strategy and a pipeline, not only of business, but a pipeline of people and sales professionals that are ready to go. Now you're able to go in there and say, here, let me tell you my story. Here's what we're doing. Because there are studies that will back up the fact that if you introduce new people or you introduce a new product, right? So you decide that you can solve a different problem, that excitement level can garner you new revenue right away. And so focusing on having those right people. But I want to be positive on this, Ron. I'll give your listeners some sales tips, some things that I think about real quick when you're trying to generate revenue and grow your team in a time like this. So one of the things that I tell businesses is become narrow. So the riches are in the niches. We talk about that all the time. But the difference is, instead of taking 100 prospects right now and calling each one of them 5 times, trying to get something going, what I'm recommending is take 20 of them and call them 15 to 20 times. I mean, just beat them down until they talk to you, right? And I know that seems counterintuitive to some people, but the reality is you have to go after it and say, I'm hungry right now and I'm here to solve a problem. So the first thing is be narrow. The second thing is be visible. You got to be out telling your salespeople, or look, 60% of the day I need to be in some type of revenue generation or more. Some businesses, that might be 70 or 80%. The other thing, Ron, is to huddle around your salespeople and find out what are they hearing out there, so that you can get together and collaborate, on some ideas around how maybe you can solve a particular problem, especially if you're a business like in your world, cybersecurity. Maybe you deal, let's say, with banks. Well, you would want all of your salespeople. What are the banks telling you, and acquire that information, and now you can have a strategy. The last thing that I would tell you is that you want to try to take a look at your competitors and see if you can identify their second-tier clients. This is a powerful strategy for your listeners, because that second-tier client in a crisis sometimes gets forgotten about. And that second-tier client of theirs that is growing will be an ideal customer for you down the road. And so if you treat them with care, I used to tell my bankers back when I was in the banking world, the best time to pick off a client from an incumbent bank is on year one, because usually in banking, there's usually an annual type renewal. So visit with that person 8 months before, see when they made that move, and see if they're really happy with it. And most of the time, 30% of the time, they're not. Great time to pick them off. So in your world, maybe they signed 2-year contracts at 16 months. That's when you need to start talking to them, like, were you happy with the move? That type of thing. Mm-hmm. That's one great time. The second time is the long-time clients, which will surprise people when I say that. But the long-time clients are usually the firm starts to get complacent for them. They start to take advantage of them. The salesperson that brought them in years ago, Ron, isn't there anymore. Right. And so now there's a great opportunity to steal those great clients and grow some revenue.
Some of my biggest clients I've gotten almost with no effort at all, because I just walked in at the right time. They were so dissatisfied with who they'd been using. I I remember one in particular, they'd used them for years. They hadn't been able to talk to the same person twice. The original salesperson no longer there,
Yeah,
and they couldn't get anything out of them except a bill every month.
that's
So
right.
I want to take one moment. When we come
Yep.
back, I want to pick up on that. Looking at your competitors, identifying second tier clients. Let's pick up there, but we need to take a quick break. You're listening to Ron Bush with Ron Bush Consulting. We're an information security consultancy. You might check out our book, or my book, Staying Safe in a Very Dangerous World. It's an excellent book. It's available on Amazon, either in paper or for the Kindle. Check out Larry Young, who's with us today. His book, Walking the Sales Plank, is an excellent resource. I've used it. And in fact, we talked about it early on. I think the first time you were on, we were talking about that book.
That's right.
It's an excellent book. Check us out on a regular basis. The Information Playground is available on YouTube video or on as a podcast on any of the podcast platforms. And of course, you can listen to us on WVLP. So that said, Larry, let's pick up with how do you identify your second tier client? Let's get into that. Let's talk about that more. I find that exciting, and you saw me taking notes. I'm going to continue taking notes.
Yeah, yeah. So a lot of that happens as you're going through your business development process. So it depends because again, there's a diversity of your audience in here. You'll typically know, like in banking, it was easy because you have your top tier clients, and if you're out, like I would say that the salespeople should be out 60 to 70% of the time turning over rocks, and you start to figure out over time who those great clients are after you get into those conversations, and then who they bank with. Same with you. Who does their cybersecurity? Who does this? Anybody can do this. But it's really the work, Ron, becomes the database. And you can start to, when you've been in a certain business for a long time, you can start to categorize who the players are that you want to work with, you want to do your consulting with, or you want to sell to, and you know who those top tier are. But then when I say bottom tier, all I'm saying is that they may not generate as much revenue for that firm. So they got all hands on deck. They're focused on retaining their biggest clients of all. And then there's that second tier. So the only way you really know that is through having a consistent business development process where you're identifying those targets and whatnot. I think you and I talked about it offline one time, that really by and large, and studies back this up, that you really only have about 200 to maybe 500 ideal clients, like in the business to business space. There's really only, and some of those are smaller markets when you're thinking about, the Fortune 500 or the big whatever. But at the end of the day, it's easy to start to identify those and know where those tiers are and then call on them.
Excellent. So, any other quick hits that we as owners can do to find revenue?
Yeah, there's a number of things. I mean, you can think about getting revenue or generating cash. You can think about extending your payables, the terms on when you owe things. You can possibly try to maybe not necessarily give discounts, but maybe incentivize, throw in, like I said, a free warranty if they pay within 30 days instead of 60. You can start to generate cash. There's we're probably at the end of it, but there was the PPP program, being able to kind of go after those dollars, which who knows where that's going to be now. Selling idle assets is a way to generate cash. So there are things laying around, machinery, equipment that you don't need. Sometimes there's a downside to that, but those are ideas. Maybe joining with a complementary business, that would create economies of scale. Maybe I sell candy and you sell flowers, and maybe we can somehow work together. I mean, there's all sorts of those types of things, but kind of look at maybe suppliers or vendors or maybe complementary businesses and start talking about how can we maybe work together. And that's usually a way that you can start to maybe garner some quick revenue, things of that nature. Yeah.
That's excellent. So how do you protect your competitors? How do you protect from competitors taking your customers away when they're slashing their products to survive?
Yeah. Now you're going to get me excited. I love this. That's a great question. Okay, so when you think about, one of the fastest ways to grow or maintain revenue is to not lose revenue. So I'll take you back to the idea of you have your core clients, that generate the revenue, what you're good at, and you're able to meet those needs. And so really taking the time to focus on those. And really what we want to make sure that they do is they understand, Ron, that you're doing a good job for them. So I'll give you a really good example. In fact, I'll tell you, before I do that, the strategy that I employed years ago, I use this with my sales team. So I was in the highly competitive world of commercial banking. So all of my customers, by and large, were commercial businesses, as I mentioned at the onset. Extremely competitive industry. So, in the town I'm in right now, there's probably 65, 70 other banks, and all of those banks want some of my dream clients. And so they're always willing to go out there and either slash a price or give something away or that type of thing. And so retention is a big piece. So something I'll share with your listeners is a powerful tool. It's a very simple tool, but I started to implement what I call the value scorecard. So the value scorecard is designed to tell my dream clients how I'm doing for those. I'll give you a funny example, if you don't mind. So I moved to Phoenix, this is 6-7 years ago, and my wife and I buy this house. And of course, in Phoenix, as you know, which is different from the Midwest where I came from, you got to have a pest company at all times. Yeah. So I buy the house and I have this pest company come out and they spray. And it's kind of gross, but at the next day, Ron, it's bug Armageddon, right? Literally have to sweep and scoop the bugs, because the house had been sitting idle for some particular time. And so they come out the next month and they spray, and of course there's fewer bugs. In the third or fourth month, there's nothing, right? There's no bugs. Now this pest company, they were great on a number of levels: customer service and their payment portal, and of course the results, that type of thing. So now I'm sitting there and I got people knocking on my door all the time, right? On every Saturday, boom, boom, boom. Where I'm with this pest company, we can cut your rates, we can do it cheaper. They tell me how they got some type of immersion program or something that's better. And I stayed loyal to them, right? And I stayed loyal to these guys. About 7 months in, now all of a sudden I'm sitting there going, well, I wonder if I am getting a good deal. So the guy gets done spraying and he goes, do you have any other problems? I said, honestly, I haven't seen any bugs since month 2. Because I'm thinking maybe I'm getting ripped off, like I'm paying this money, and am I really getting anything because I don't see anything? And he looks at me and he says, then we're doing our job. And it stopped me. It stopped me in my tracks. It's a funny story. It's a simple story, but where it applies to all of us is that there's a lot of us out there that take a lot of pride, let's say, in great service, and attention, like you said, caring about clients and that type of stuff. But sometimes we do such a great job that sometimes they just forget we're doing a great job, right? There's no, quote, bugs anymore because you're making all their problems go away. So I came up with this idea, this value scorecard years ago, and it really was based off kind of that stories, if you will. But the idea is that you're telling your clients what you did for them, your top, and you can do this on your top 10, top 20 clients or top 20%, but sending them on an annual basis, just a short letter, just less than a page long, nothing long, that just outlines the general things you did for them. Not necessarily like an attorney where I'm saying, well, I sent you an email on this day, or, I'm joking, but what you're doing is you're just saying, here's the major things that I do. And not being afraid to mention the things in which you created the most value. So not just the work you did, it could be a synopsis, but here's the things you came through. If we got time, I'll share with you a short story to make the point. So I do in the work I do with it, as we both do, which we do public speaking and workshops and things. You and I have a lot of printing. So I found this printing company in Mesa, Arizona called Market Builders, and they do an incredible job. Keith Lawson is the owner, and he's done all of my printing. So I come up on this event last fall where all of a sudden I realized about 3 days before the event that I needed something that I didn't have. So I get on the phone and I call Keith. I said, Keith, can you come through for me? And it was one of those calls, Ron, where he goes, yes, but I know in his mind he was figuring out how the heck am I going to pull this off for Larry, right? And I'm not even a top 10 client. That's just the guy he is. Well, anyways, he came through at the great work that, Keith expects. That would be something, Ron, that if your business strategy is to tell your clients that we turn things around and of quality, that would be a great synopsis. As just a reminder, on September 3rd, we finished this project, 3-day turnaround, 3-day emergency turnaround for this particular event. He's not bragging. He's just letting me know, because here's why. Keith did a great job, but fast forward a year from now, year and a half from now, is it plausible that I could start to forget that?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I tell people, and we did this all the time, I do it now in my business, you need to have a value scorecard and remind your clients on an annual basis the exceptional value, and that can be whatever you define that is, and that will keep you from getting picked off. So just like the pest company, when your competitors come knocking, it's going to be more top of mind.
That's great. I love the story. And honestly, it takes me back, not to the business I do now, and don't ask me why I didn't carry it through, but in a previous business that I owned, on an annual basis, I would meet with all of my clients, take them to lunch, whatever they'd let me do. Sometimes it was in their office, but I always preferred getting them out, especially the larger clients, because the phone doesn't stop ringing and the, people coming into the
Right.
office doesn't stop. So I love getting them out. And I had just a real short questionnaire. And it was basically, how are we doing? Is there anything that we haven't done that we should be doing? What are we doing that we could improve on? Are there any problems? I mean, I owned the company. I had 30 employees, 33 in some of the time. But sometimes we made mistakes. I always made sure that in the event we did make a mistake, my employee didn't go out and tell them that. I did. First off, I figured if anybody's going to take a beating, it'd be me. But second off, I wanted them to know that I had the authority to fix it. An employee didn't. I could fix it. I would take care of it, and I would make sure it got taken care of then. That once a year thing was just, I did it because I wanted to know. I was new in that industry, and this is going back 20 years, but I wanted to be sure I was doing everything right.
Yeah.
And if anybody had any complaints, well, I didn't want them telling my competitor. I wanted them telling me.
Right.
And so it worked like a charm. I wish I had known you back then. I would have done it a little different. And I'm going to employ that now.
Yeah.
Don't ask me why I forgot about it when I started another business, but I did.
Well, one of the things, Ron, I would throw out there when I forgot to mention is typically on the bottom of that form, I would put something like, tell me how I can provide more value for you in the upcoming year, or, tell me how I can do a better job. So it became more of, to them, here's the value that I believe that I created. How could I do more for you? So the consciousness of your customer is, this person is always trying to create value. And then I just have at the bottom, just scan and email this to me, so that I could really start to then focus on the value added activities. And that's how you keep them from picking them off. I can tell you in, 20, almost 20, not 20, but probably 12 years of the commercial banking piece of it, it would be hard for me, Ron, to find a name of a client that really got picked off.
Yeah.
In all those years, which is incredible in that world. And I owe a lot of it to that idea that whether you sit down with them and cover the document or you mail it, that's all up to your individual preference. But it makes a big deal because it also shows you care.
Well, today I'm nationwide, so it only makes sense to email it. Back then it was all local, and it made sense to take them out. Boy, I love that idea. That is just excellent. So we've talked about how to keep the competition from getting to our clients. Once we grow the higher margin revenue from what we discussed, does this help us for the next recession?
Yeah, it does, Ron. So when I do the business development strategy, what our real goal is to help businesses, not to necessarily say that they're the best in the industry. It's really to help them become the most profitable in the industry. So being best or the greatest or number one is all kind of it's a number made up, and how do you really define that? And so really thinking about if it's your business, how do you become the most profitable in the industry by serving and taking care of your clients? What you do with that profit is what dictates your ability to be able to survive or take the initial wave of the next recession. So what is it that you do to improve, let's say, as a business owner, your balance sheet? So when I talk to business, a lot of times I think about revenue, which is ironic. That's what we're talking about today, but
Right.
revenue, profitability, and those types of things. But then how does that translate, and what do you do on your balance sheet? Do you pay off your debt? Do you increase your liquidity? Do you continue to improve your margins? Those types of things. Because what it does for you is that when your position and your balance sheet is strong, your cash flow is strong. So those three statements, what it allows you to be able to do is seize opportunities in a recession than others can't. I think we might have not joked last time, but we talked about how Warren Buffett would say, the time to buy is when there's blood in the streets, and
Right.
I know that's kind of sad to say because people are hurting right now, but it does allow you the decisions that you make, and hopefully you have a financial counselor or a banker or somebody that helps you decide and helps you guide with that. How do you strengthen that balance sheet? Because there's nothing better than having that cash and that liquidity or those free and clear idle assets to be able to help you survive during this time, rather than, like we were talking earlier, have to lay off people either at all or so quick. And so that's what helps you to survive. That also, Ron, the reason that we do that with clients is because what we're trying to do is then use that to position for massive growth. Because now all of a sudden I have cash, and so I can take advantage of an opportunity, and all of a sudden that becomes a whole new business line for me. Mm-hmm. And that's really where there is a saying, and not a saying, but a kind of a philosophy back when I was in the banking world, that the decisions that you make in great times is what helps you through the bad times. The decisions that you make in bad times is what fuels the massive growth for the good times. And that's really kind of where my thought lies on that.
Well said. Well said. So you and I have talked prior to recording, and we've just got a few minutes left.
Okay.
We've been talking about a three-part series. The next time we get together, we'll be starting defining the sound of your dream client's voice. I love the title.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about it. Tell me what you have in mind.
Yeah, that one, that I'm excited. I'm glad we came up with three-part, because sometimes when you do these for an hour, believe it or not, you push so much in that I don't know that, it's hard to take some notes and whatnot. But where we want to go with this series is really understanding what your dream clients are saying today. So what we focus on is we help clients to find their voice. So what is it that we're really good at? What is it that kind of that core piece that we were talking about earlier? And then really then going out and finding the dream client that cares about that. So as a quick example, if I say, well, I'm so great at customer service, but for some goofy reason my clients don't care, then I really can't produce higher margin revenue because I can't combine the value. So the whole idea is aligning that value along with that voice. Mm-hmm. And then in the next part of the series, we really want to focus on then how do I position my organization and my sales force in the middle of that target market, so that we really start to get a sense. So they're playing in the field, if you follow me, in which their clients care about what they're offering, and they have something that they can offer them that they dominate. And then the third part is really then looking at, do I have the processes in place, Ron, to then be able to facilitate that? So as a quick example, you use Walmart, but if I decided I was going to be a low-cost provider, if that's my business model, does the value chain that I have and where I get my supplies and those types of things, is that conducive for that? So it'll build on each of those steps, and it'll help your listeners that are business owners to kind of position themselves for that high margin revenue growth. So the point of it is I'm going to share with them some deep stuff that I share in workshops and some of the business strategic planning. I'm going to share that with your listeners over this 3-part series.
Great. Well, I'll be looking forward to it. I trust our listeners will be looking forward to it as well. I want to thank you for being on the program today. Always a pleasure, and I always learn something. You catch me taking notes over here. Folks, thank you for being with us. I hope you've learned something. Larry's an excellent teacher. He's an excellent speaker. I've heard him speak, and I'm always grateful when you're on the program. So Larry Young, author of Walking the Sales Plank, owner of Boiling
Frog Development.
Thank you very much.
That's
Boiling
right.
Frog Development. Just went blank. How can people look you up? It's give us the website.
Yeah, easy enough. BoilingFrogDevelopment.com. I made that easy. Boiling Frog out on Facebook is easy to message me, or you can email me at boilingfrogdevelopment@gmail.com. And that's the easiest way to reach. And I give just conversations with people for nothing to kind of see where we want to go and see if some of those things that we talked about might be a fit for them. So thank you for having me on, Ron.
Thank you for being on. I'm Ron Bush, Ron Bush Consulting. You've been listening to the Information Playground. If you've got thoughts or questions about the program, email me, ron@ronbushconsulting.com. Check out our website. Check out my book on Amazon, Staying Safe in a Very Dangerous World. Hope you have a great week. Stay safe and stay healthy.